What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Now obviously these phones are in completely different price ranges, but that being said, you might be in a situation where you typically get more mid-range phones like the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, but maybe this time around you might be considering upgrading to something like a Samsung Galaxy S21 FE instead. So in this video, we're going to be going over the similarities and differences between the two to give you a better idea of which phone is going to be more worth it for you. Now as always, before we go any further, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, and if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. So if you're interested, definitely check that out, but otherwise, let's get into it. So with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, we're getting a 6.6-inch 120Hz PLS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 400, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 82.5% screen-to-body ratio. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting a 6.4-inch 120Hz dynamic AMOLED display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 411, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 85.3% screen-to-body ratio. So in general, these phones do have really good displays, but each phone does have its own advantages. On one hand, with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G at 6.6 inches versus 6.4, the A23 5G is a little bit larger, which can be a good thing if you're consuming a lot of content. On the other hand though, with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, the dynamic AMOLED display is much better display technology than a PLS LCD. So with the S21 FE, not only are the colors and brightness going to be a little bit better, but the viewing angles are also much better as well. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, or really in any brighter setting, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to be quite a bit easier to see than the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G. But overall, again, both phones do have really good displays, and if you're consuming a lot of content, or really just doing anything that requires you to have a good display, you're really not going to go wrong with either phone. But that being said, if I personally had to choose, I would definitely say the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE has a bit of an advantage, because again, the dynamic AMOLED display technology is just so much better. So if you want a really good image quality, then the S21 FE is definitely the way to go. But at the same time, if you just want a really nice looking display, and you're not too concerned with having the best image quality, or maybe you just want a slightly larger display, in that case, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G will be perfectly fine. Now for storage, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G is getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is getting 128GB, and this phone does not have microSD card expansion. Now in general, even though microSD card expansion is a bit of an advantage for the A23 5G, I personally feel like the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE still does have the major advantage here, having double the internal storage of the A23 5G, unless of course you get the international version, which does have 128GB. But in general, if you're in the US, any version of the A23 5G you get through a carrier is going to have 64GB. Whereas with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, not only does the regular version have 128GB, giving it double the storage, but there's also another variant of this phone that has 256. So in general, even though again the S21 FE doesn't have microSD card expansion unfortunately, keep in mind this is a flagship phone, and with phones like this, that's really just something you have to deal with. But other than that, this phone honestly just has so much internal storage that at the end of the day, especially when compared to a phone that only has 64GB of internal storage, microSD card expansion really just doesn't matter a whole lot. So overall, if you're more of a power user, if you have a lot of apps and stuff like that, then I would say between the two, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE will be a better choice. But that being said, if you're more of a light user, maybe you want a decent amount of storage, but you're still not really going to do a ton on your phone, maybe you don't have a lot of apps or games or anything like that, then in that case, with 64GB, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G will still be at least acceptable. Now for security features, both phones have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners as well. With the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, it's right here in the power key, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, it's right here in the display. But starting with the A23 5G, let's go ahead and try them out. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the S21 FE. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see there, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, remember, these phones also do have Face Unlock as well, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, we got a water drop notch for the front facing camera. This camera is 8 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. For video, this phone has a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K unfortunately, but for a phone in this price range, that's not too surprising. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we got a hole punch for the front-facing camera. This camera is 32 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 12 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera. For video, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE has a max recording quality of 4K at 60 frames per second in both the rear and front cameras, so definitely great quality here. So in general, when it comes to the cameras, I definitely will say the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is pretty much better in every way. Sure, on one hand, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G technically has a higher megapixel main camera and it has a macro camera, but keep in mind, with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, this is a flagship phone and the sensor and everything is just going to be higher quality in general. So despite only having a 12 megapixel main camera versus 50 megapixels, keep in mind megapixels aren't everything, and overall I will say from experience, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE does take significantly better photos. In addition to this, with the telephoto lens, even though the phone doesn't have a macro camera, you can still kind of use the telephoto lens as a macro camera, so even though a dedicated macro camera does technically have its value, I would still say overall, especially when you consider the video quality, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE definitely has a huge advantage when it comes to the camera. So in general, if you're taking a lot of photos, recording a lot of videos, and the quality is really important to you, then I would definitely say the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE will be a significantly better choice. But on the other hand, if you're more of a casual camera user and you want to get nice pictures, but you still don't need the absolute best quality, keep in mind the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G still does take really nice photos, and honestly for most people, I do think this phone is still going to be perfectly fine. But of course, again, if you want the best camera quality between the two, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE definitely wins this. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G is getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G processor. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 5G processor. So in general, between the two, when it comes to performance, both phones are really fast for what they are. But while the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G is going to be plenty fast for the average user, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to be significantly faster because keep in mind, again, this is a flagship phone. Sure, it's not the highest end flagship phone like the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, but it is a flagship phone all the same, whereas the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G is really just a budget phone. So in general, for the average user, if you're just going to be using your phone for more basic activities like web browsing, social media, streaming content like videos and music, and maybe some light mobile gaming here and there, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G will be plenty fast enough for you. But on the other hand, if you want the fastest phone between the two, maybe you're doing something more intense like playing Call of Duty for example, in that kind of situation, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE will be a significantly better choice. Because again, while the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G is not slow by any means, as a much higher end device, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to be significantly faster. Now that being said, I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and here are the scores I got. As you can see from this test, again, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE has a significant advantage. So yeah, of course, if you want the fastest phone between the two, then this is definitely going to be a much better choice. But that being said, what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of which phone is going to be a more appropriate upgrade for you. You may find out that while obviously the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is much faster, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G might be a good enough upgrade already. Now for the battery, this is actually one area where the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G technically does have a bit of an advantage. With this phone, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 25 watt fast charging, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting a 4500 mAh battery that supports 25 watt fast charging as well. Now on one hand, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE's battery is really not small, and in my experience, keep in mind, I actually do use this phone to record most of the videos on this channel, and trust me, the battery life on this phone is really not bad. But that being said, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G will have slightly better battery life, so if that's really your #1 priority, then definitely keep this in mind. But that being said, on the other hand, one advantage the S21 FE does have in the battery area is this phone actually does have wireless charging, whereas the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, like all A-series phones, does not have wireless charging. So if you care about that feature, definitely keep this in mind, because in that case, the S21 FE will of course have an advantage. Another thing to keep in mind here is that both phones do have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, you'll be happy to know you can do that with either of these phones. But in conclusion, this is typically where I go over which phone is better, but honestly between these two it's kinda obvious. The Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, being a significantly higher end phone from the same manufacturer, is obviously going to be the better phone, but let's instead talk about when each phone would make more sense for you. On one hand, if you're really not a heavy user, if you're not going to be on your phone all the time, you don't have a lot of apps and games and stuff like that, you're not taking a ton of pictures, you don't need the most amazing photo and video quality, and you really just need a phone for basic daily activities that has decent performance and maybe a good battery. In that kind of situation, despite the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE technically being a better phone, I really don't think you need something this high end. Instead, for more basic users, I do think the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G is going to be plenty good enough for you. This phone has a great display, a really good camera, a decently acceptable amount of storage, great performance, and a really large battery, and this phone even has NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, you can always do that on this phone as well. On the other hand though, if you're really going to be on your phone all the time, maybe doing stuff like high performance mobile gaming for example, where you would really benefit from a lot more processing power, or maybe you're taking a lot of photos and you want the best photo quality possible, or maybe you're just a power user when it comes to consuming content and you're just watching videos all the time and you want the best looking display, if any or maybe all of those things apply to you, then I do think the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE would be a really good choice for you, especially considering with this phone, you get a lot of the features you get with a really high-end device without having to spend $1,400 on the S22 Ultra. So in that case, if you really want flagship features, flagship performance, and a really high quality camera and display, but you don't really want to spend a ton of money on your phone, that's really when the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to be a great choice. But this concludes my comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Again, if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Khalipa's Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.